If you have ever felt genuinely misunderstood for seeing potential problems before anyone else does, this is worth actually understanding rather than continuing to apologize for. There is a specific person who walks into any new situation already scanning for what might go wrong, already mentally rehearsing the disappointing outcome, already bracing for bad news that has not actually arrived yet. Other people call this negativity. Real psychological research offers a considerably more precise and considerably more sympathetic name for it: defensive pessimism, and Carl Jung's understanding of the persona as a genuinely useful layer to why this specific strategy can feel like the only genuinely safe way to move through the world. Researchers describe defensive pessimism as a genuine cognitive strategy, not simply a fixed negative personality trait in which a person deliberately sets low expectations before a situation unfolds and then mentally works through every specific way it might go wrong in advance. This is not passive doom and gloom. It is an active, considered process, and research has found that people who use this strategy effectively often perform genuinely well, since the anxiety this process manages gets channeled into real, specific preparation rather than simply spiraling unproductively. This explains why simply telling a defensive pessimist to just think positive rarely actually helps, and can sometimes make genuine performance considerably worse. Research on this exact pattern has found that forcing an optimistic outlook onto someone who naturally uses defensive pessimism can actually disrupt the specific cognitive strategy that was previously helping them manage their anxiety effectively, removing the low expectations that were doing real functional work and leaving the underlying anxiety without its usual productive outlet. Jung's understanding adds a genuinely useful, deeper layer to why this strategy develops in the first place. He believed that a persona, the presentable functioning self a person maintains, often develops specific protective strategies in direct response to a genuine early environment, and a person who grew up in circumstances where disappointment arrived unpredictably or where hoping for a good outcome was repeatedly punished by an outcome that did not materialize, often develops a persona that treats low expectations as a genuine form of protection. If you never really expect things to go well, the actual disappointment, when it does arrive, lands with considerably less force than it would against a persona that had allowed itself genuine, unguarded hope. This explains why defensive pessimism so often persists even once a person's actual current circumstances have genuinely improved, since the strategy was never really calibrated to present objective risk. It was calibrated to an earlier environment's genuine unpredictability, and it continues operating automatically, regardless of whether the current situation actually still requires this same protective bracing. Here is what makes this understanding genuinely useful rather than simply an explanation for an occasionally frustrating outlook. If defensive pessimism is genuinely working for you, actually channeling real anxiety into real useful preparation rather than simply producing unproductive spiraling, this is worth recognizing as a genuine functional strategy rather than something requiring immediate correction into forced positivity. The actual question worth asking honestly is not whether the strategy looks negative from the outside, but whether it is genuinely serving you, managing real anxiety productively, or whether it has become considerably more costly than helpful, producing chronic, exhausting dread without actually translating into useful, concrete preparation. Here is what actually helps in examining this pattern directly. It helps to notice honestly whether your specific version of expecting the worst leads to real concrete action, actual preparation, actual contingency plans, or whether it simply produces prolonged, unproductive worry without ever translating into anything genuinely useful. The first version reflects defensive pessimism working as the genuine functional strategy research describes. The second may deserve separate, honest attention, since worry without productive action tends to simply exhaust a person without providing the real protective benefit the strategy was originally meant to offer. There is a second thing worth practicing directly: particularly if you want to gradually soften this pattern rather than either forcing it away entirely or leaving it permanently unexamined. It helps to test in genuinely low stakes situations, allowing yourself a small amount of genuine, unguarded hope and observing directly what actually happens, since this small repeated practice gradually builds real evidence about whether your current circumstances actually still require the same level of protective bracing that an earlier, less predictable environment once genuinely demanded. If you recognize this specific pattern of consistently expecting the worst, hear this clearly. This was never simple negativity or a character flaw requiring correction into forced optimism. According to both real research and Jung's understanding, it very often reflects a genuine protective strategy built for real, understandable reasons that deserves honest evaluation of its actual current usefulness rather than either uncritical acceptance or dismissive correction. Think honestly about your own tendency to expect the worst and consider whether it genuinely translates into real, useful preparation or whether it has become a source of chronic worry that no longer actually serves the protective function it once did. Right below the single word for the specific situation where this pattern shows up most strongly for you. Naming it honestly and examining whether it genuinely still serves you is the real and practical way you begin either honoring the strategy as the functional tool it can genuinely be or gently loosening it where it simply becomes exhausting without actually protecting you from anything real. There is a final piece worth naming since it distinguishes this understanding from simply encouraging permanent, unguarded optimism instead. The goal was never replacing defensive pessimism with blind, uncritical hope, which carries its own genuine risks. It was building enough conscious awareness of the strategy that you can actually choose when it genuinely serves you and when it has simply become an automatic, exhausting habit no longer matched to your real, current circumstances. Because always expecting the worst was never, according to both real research and Carl Jung's understanding, simple negativity or pessimism for its own sake. It was very often a genuine protective strategy built for real reasons, and understanding this honestly was always the real practical path toward finally deciding whether it still deserves the weight you have been giving it.